The village of Omua was a place where the earth was always pregnant. The yams swelled beneath the soil until they burst the ground. The rains fell until the river groaned with fish, and every season, the sound of rhythmic pounding, the thump-thump of pestles, was accompanied by the high-pitched cries of new life. But in the house of Adanna, the only thing that grew was the silence. Adanna was a woman of grace, with skin the color of polished mahogany, and hands that could make the most stubborn hibiscus bloom. Yet in the eyes of the village, she was a tree that refused to bear fruit. They called her Agbanma, the beautiful shell with nothing inside. The weight of the empty cradle. Every morning, Adanna walked to the stream. She watched the other women, their backs bent under the weight of chubby babies, wrapped in vibrant Dutch wax prints. They shared stories of sleepless nights and teething fevers. When Adanna approached, the laughter would often dip into a low, pitying murmur. "A woman is a garden," the elders would whisper. "If the garden is brown, what use is the fence?" Her husband, Obinna, was a man of quiet strength. In the beginning, he brought her roots from the deep forest and herbs from the traveling healers. He held her through the nights when she wept against his chest, her tears soaking his tunic. But as the years turned into a decade, even Obinna's eyes began to wander toward the sprawling families of his brothers. The pressure from the kinsmen was a cold wind that never stopped blowing. The night of the moon. One evening during the New Yam festival, the village was alive with the smell of roasting meat and the thunder of drums. Adanna sat on the outskirts of the firelight. She watched a young mother struggle to settle a fussy toddler. Without thinking, Adanna reached out. The mother pulled the child back instinctively, a flash of superstition in her eyes. It was the look people gave to something cursed, as if barrenness were a shadow that could jump from one skin to another. Adanna didn't cry. She stood up, walked past the dancing circles, and headed into the quiet of the bush. She walked until the drums were just a heartbeat in the distance. She sat by the great Iroko tree and looked at the moon. "I am a mother," she whispered to the stars. "I am a mother to the seeds I plant. I am a mother to the stories I tell. Why must my worth be measured only by what leaves my womb?" The turning of the tide. The following month, a fever swept through Omua. It hit the children the hardest. The village was paralyzed with fear. The healers were overwhelmed, and the mothers were blinded by their own panic. It was Adanna who stepped into the gap. She did not have children of her own to shield, so she walked into the houses of the sick. She used the knowledge of herbs she had gathered during her years of seeking a cure for herself, not to conceive, but to heal. She stayed awake for 7 nights, sponging foreheads, brewing bitter teas, and singing the low, melodic stories that had lived inside her for years. She became the steady hand that the village lacked. She didn't just nurse their bodies, she mothered their spirits. A new name. When the fever finally broke and the village breathed again, the silence in Adanna's house was gone. It was replaced by the patter of feet, not her own children, but the children of the village who came to hear her stories. The mothers who once pulled their babies away now brought them to her door, seeking her wisdom. The elders no longer called her the barren woman. They called her Neora, the mother of all. Adanna realized that her emptiness had actually been a vast space, one large enough to hold the entire village. She was no longer a dry garden. She was the rain that kept the whole forest green. The earth was still pregnant, and so was she, not with a child, but with a legacy that would outlive any name. The Weaver of Whispers. In a town where the wind never blew, the air was heavy with the weight of unspoken things. People carried their secrets like heavy stones in their pockets, and over time their shoulders began to stoop and their faces grew gray. In the center of this town lived an old man named Elian. He didn't farm, and he didn't trade. He sat on a small wooden stool in the marketplace with a golden spindle that had no thread, the trade. Whenever someone felt their stone becoming too heavy to carry, they would sit before Elian. They would whisper their secret, a regret, a hidden joy, or a long-lost dream into the empty air above the spindle. As they spoke, Elian's hands would move with the grace of a dancer. To the naked eye, it looked like he was weaving nothing, but as the secret left the person's lips, a shimmering, translucent thread would appear, wrapping around the golden spindle. By the time the person finished speaking, their shoulders would straighten and their eyes would clear. They had given their burden to the weaver. The secret tapestry. For 50 years, Elian wove. People wondered what he did with the threads. Some thought he burned them, others thought he swallowed them. But every night, when the moon was high and the town was asleep, Elian climbed the highest hill. He would take the shimmering threads from that day and hook them onto the stars. He wasn't just taking their secrets. He was turning their private pains into public light. The constellations that guided the sailors and the midnight travelers were actually the woven stories of the townspeople, pinned to the velvet of the night sky, the day the wind blew. One afternoon, a young girl named Maya approached Elian. She didn't have a secret of regret. She whispered a question. What happens when you run out of room in the sky? Elian smiled, his eyes twinkling like the very stars he tended. The sky is as deep as the human heart, Maya. There is always room for one more light. Just then, for the first time in 100 years, a breeze swept through the town. It wasn't a cold wind, but a warm, fragrant one. It carried the scent of rain and blooming jasmine. As the wind brushed past Elian's spindle, the threads didn't break. They hummed. The sound was like 1,000 voices singing in harmony. The town people stepped out of their homes, looking up. For the first time, they didn't see each other as strangers carrying stones. They saw each other as part of the same song, the legacy. Elian eventually grew tired, and the golden spindle stopped spinning. But the wind never left the town again. Now, whenever someone feels a burden, they don't have to find a weaver. They simply stand in the breeze and speak. The wind carries their words up to the heights, adding new stars to the map of the world. And Maya, the girl who asked the question, now sits on a wooden stool in the marketplace, not with a spindle but with a pen, making sure that even the smallest whisper is never forgotten.